Thank you. It looks like I'm just on time, right on time. My name's Karen McDonald, and gosh, we've been at this a long time. You're right. That was a year ago. The summer Simca was almost a year ago. So I'm a former family court judge. Before that, I was a lawyer at Jaffe and a shareholder there, which is the largest law firm in Oakland County. Before that, I was an assistant prosecutor where I prosecuted child sexual assault cases. And before I went to law school, I started my professional career as a public school teacher. So a year and a half ago, took the very unusual step of stepping down from my job as a judge. And I had to do that because when you go to a nonpartisan seat to a partisan seat, which of course the prosecutor's race is, you have to be off the bench for an entire year. And so that's what I did. A lot of people were shocked by that. Lots of people want that job, including Lori Saban, who's on the call right now, because it's a great job. But I did that because it seemed to me, I became convinced that the prosecutor is really the only person that can really move the needle on criminal justice reform. So everybody in the court system, usually, most people have one of two issues. They have a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue. And if we don't address the underlying reasons why people come into the criminal justice system, then what we end up doing is just mass incarcerating people. And in this country, we incarcerate more people than any other country in the entire world. Crime has gone down, incarceration has gone up. And I'm a mother, and I feel very strongly about keeping our streets safe. I spent my time at the prosecutor's office in the child sexual assault unit. So violent offenders who are a risk to our community should be in prison. That's an easy one. What's not easy is incarcerating low-level, non-violent offenders for a period of time, and then we release them back into the community with less resources than they had before, and they couldn't parent their children or have a job or housing. And we are doing so at a tremendous cost to the taxpayer. But more importantly, it's just not my worldview. It's just not what I'm made up of. I believe that people should be held accountable, but I also believe that people make mistakes. And if we really want to make our community safer, then we have to put resources and focus on the reasons people come into the criminal justice system. And so our prosecutor currently has been there for a very long time, and she will not participate in treatment courts. In 2008, when Jessica Cooper took office, she refused to participate in the drug treatment court. They had to have an emergency rewrite in Lansing of the statute because it required the prosecutor's participation. For good reason. It's more effective when the prosecutor's involved because they have the ability to reduce or dismiss the charge, but also, and as the public, representing the public, you sort of want the prosecutor involved because they can say, you know what, I don't think this person is a good candidate for treatment court. And by the way, treatment court is not a way to let somebody off. It's actually quite difficult to get through treatment court. And there's a big carrot at the end, a reduction or dismissal. In this case, we can't do that because the prosecutor's not involved. But it's giving resources and treatment so that we're not just treating people like a revolving door. They're coming into the criminal justice system and then they're let off. They reoffend because they have less resources than when they went in. So that is a big issue for me. And we're the only county in the whole state that doesn't have a prosecutor that will participate in treatment courts. She won't participate in veterans court. One of the things I really want to bring to Oakland County is a mental health court. There's so many people who are sitting in the Oakland County jail right now and prison who have a mental health issue. And if we don't address it, first of all, I don't think it's the right thing to do for the individual, but we're not being safe. We're not safer because we're locking people who have an opioid addiction in prison. It's not making us safe. And then the second thing is the current prosecutor's position on juvenile lifers without parole. You know, the United States Supreme Court has spoken. A juvenile life without parole sentence is unconstitutional, except in very rare cases. And our current prosecutor believes that out of the 47 of the juvenile lifers who've been serving, some of them over 40 years in prison, should still sit in prison for the rest of their life without parole. And that's just, it's contrary to the law, but it's also contrary to what I think, which is kids should be treated like kids. if you're a danger to your society, you should be held accountable. You should be held accountable no matter what. But defying the law and keeping those juvenile lifers in prison is, in my view, abhorrent. And I think that needs to be addressed. So here's what I want to do when I become prosecutor. I want to, from day one, start giving assistant prosecutors discretion to reduce or amend charges. I want to give people an option and not live in a culture of fear in that office, so that they can go to their supervisor and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this charge. Right now, that's not happening. And it's a no deal situation. It's no deals. For anybody of you on the call that are criminal defense attorneys, you can't even get a reduction on a first time driving while operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol. You can't even get a minor reduction. It's no deals, which in my view makes no sense. If you don't want to give prosecutors discretion to look at files and say, you know what, there's a special circumstance here, or somebody we should take a second look, then I don't know why we have them there. I want to develop a conviction integrity unit. I believe that we sometimes get it wrong. And there are 50 of these units across the country. There's one in Wayne County. There's the Attorney General's office has one. And I think it's really important that we as leaders in the community say, if there's new evidence that comes to light on a case, there's a mechanism for the prosecutor's office to take a look at it and recommend whether there should be relief sought. There's a man who was just exonerated in Wayne County. He spent 40 plus years in prison and he was fully exonerated. I want to implement a real hate crimes unit where we have vertical prosecution from the beginning for crimes that focus on and are committed due to somebody's race, ethnicity, or how they identify. I want to create advisory committees, not just with the most outspoken people, but different community members, communities of color, the business sector, the defense bar, that you're meeting with on a regular basis. Because part of the problem right now is the prosecutor is so isolated, she doesn't have an understanding of what's going on, and actually, in my view, doesn't care. But I'd like to take credit for all this, but this more progressive agenda is being implemented across the country. It's a lot of Republicans like it too. It's not just the Democrats, for a variety of different reasons. So there's great models out there, and it works, and it reduces crime, and it reduces incarceration, and it reduces the rate of reoffense. So those are just some of the things that I want to do, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm also happy to report that my campaign has been tremendously successful. I was just notified today, I received the endorsement of UAW. I've been endorsed by the Attorney General. I've been endorsed by 4 other prosecutors around the state. Most of our state Democratic legislator representatives and senators. I think now I'm up to around 20 unions, Planned Parenthood, and recently the Oakland County Democratic Black Caucus. And look, I think people, they think I'm a good candidate, and I'm glad that they're supporting me. But what I really think is behind this is people really want change. They want an elected official who is open to change, because we desperately need it. One of the things that's really troubling me recently is one of the first forums I had with our current prosecutor. We were asked a question about how can the prosecutor relate, move, or affect racial disparity in Oakland County? And her answer was, well, we don't have racial disparity in Oakland County. You know, you go to the Pontiac and you ask them whether you think there's racial disparity. There recently has come to light the case of Mackenzie Cochran. I hope some of you have seen it. That was a George Floyd case in 2014 that happened in Oakland County. It was the exact same circumstances. 3 white security guards, an unarmed black man held down for 9 minutes. He said he couldn't breathe, and he was killed. And Jessica Cooper held a press conference weeks later and announced she would not charge any of the 3 suspects with 1 criminal charge. She just refused to do that. And so, you know, the public's holding her accountable for that. But I just think it's really, a mild way of saying it is it's tone deaf to say that you don't think there's racial disparity and we don't care about the color of somebody's skin. The thing is, you have to care. And the way to do that is by being transparent and releasing data which won't be easy because we know what it's going to say. What it's going to say is that we charge and convict people of color at a much higher rate than we do white people. So it starts with transparency. We have to make sure that we're very transparent about who we're charging, what we're charging them with, and we can't know how well we're doing unless we care enough to look. So I probably spoke too fast and I'm pretty fired up about it, but I love to entertain questions.
I think you had a question for Karen. Holly.
Noah, do you want to call on them or would you like me to?
Yeah, Holly.
I always forget to unmute. I'm intrigued by the mental health court concept. I think it's really long overdue.
Okay.
One of the things when I worked at the court many years ago, I was always struck with if a victim was someone with a disability, correctly, the prosecutor's office would take that into account and really come down hard, which I think they should. I thought that was appropriate. If the defendant, however, was somebody with a disability, with a mental health issue, it was like they didn't notice, they didn't care. So I think it's really critical that there is a mental health review. So I'm wondering also if that mental health court would also be available, applied, applicable to the abuse and neglect and the delinquency cases as well. Because I know that Children's Village is, the kids are all treated like the methods that they employ are not appropriate for all children, and a lot of the kids don't respond appropriately to the way it's set up because they might have an underlying mental health issue or educational issue that isn't being addressed. So I'm wondering if it would also apply to them as well.
Okay, well, you're speaking my language, because one of the things I don't think we talk about in criminal justice reform is the child abuse and neglect docket and the juvenile docket. If we really want to address and prevent crime and people in the criminal justice system, that's where you are. Those are the cases I presided over. That is our first look of what's going on in a home. And as you so aptly pointed out, you obviously already understand this. So many of those kids are removed from homes because of mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So yes, one of the key reasons I think we need a mental health court and treatment court for petitioners or respondents who have their children removed and have neglect and abuse petitions. We don't have those kind of specialty courts for that kind of litigant. And that's really where we need it. I mean, we need it across the board, but so I totally agree with you. And then I just want to be really candid about something. I was a prosecutor a long time ago. I didn't work for Jessica Cooper, but one of the reasons I left the office is the mentality is you go in, you try to charge the most possible, the highest crime, the most crimes you can, and you ask for the highest sentence, and don't talk to me about the victim or the defendant's issues. That's not your job. Your job is to care about the victim. And look, I was a young lawyer and I still understood that something about that just didn't sit right with me, but that's the culture, okay? It didn't really change with Jessica Cooper. And I think a lot of people thought that it would. I mean, I voted for Jessica Cooper in 2008. In fact, in my view, it became worse because she didn't care about treatment court. She doesn't think that's her job. But the culture that has been in that office, and I'm going to say from day one, from the beginning, way before I was even born, is we don't want to hear concerns about defendants. We don't want to hear you say that the case isn't strong. You're deemed weak. You're deemed as if are you afraid to try the case? Like, that's what I want to get rid of. You know, there are leaders that surround themselves with people who just tell them what they want to hear. That is not who I am. I surround myself with people who ask me really tough questions, who challenge me, who tell me they think I'm being silly or I'm just dead wrong. And that's who's on my campaign staff. That's who's on my campaign team, and people I intend to bring with me, smart people who aren't afraid to tell me what they think. And it's about electing an official, which I'm not sure we've had in the history of the office, that really cares more about what's right than they do their ego. But this is not going to be easy. And I think you've watched enough that you know, I don't know exactly what you did in the court system, but it's not easy to change this culture, because right now, those assistant prosecutors are trained to think and act a certain way. I know a lot of those assistant prosecutors, even in the warrants division, when it comes to charging something and they aren't quite convinced that that's the right thing to do, they are not free to speak up. They're viewed differently if they do. And that's just wrong. People's lives are at stake here. And I think it's a culture shift, and it's something I'm really excited about doing. And the person I want to bring in to be my chief deputy, his name is David Williams. He's also a former assistant prosecutor. He worked with me at Jaffe, and both of us left the office for those sorts of reasons. You know, I don't want to just lock a bunch of people up in jail. I don't think, like, the moment now calls for more. It calls for you all to do more. It calls for elected officials to do more. And you need somebody in the office who recognizes that. So 2 things you hit on is the culture thing. It's a culture shift. You know, I want to be the kind of prosecutor that you see in court, that goes to see assistant prosecutors, that goes in their office. People aren't afraid of me, has good discussions. We're going to have a lot of culture shifting about, okay, let's talk about cash bail. Why are you asking for a cash bail? Well, you're asking because I'm supposed to ask for a high cash bail. Okay, but why? Why are we asking for a high cash bail? Because cash bail really just hurts one group of people, poor people. If you and I get pulled over for a drunk driving offense and we go into court and you have the $250 or the $500 to post bail and I don't, I sit in jail. And my kids are not being parented, and I'm not paying my bills, and I'm not working. I'm not a threat to society. You can put something on my car. I won't even get in my car unless I have to blow and show that I'm sober. But because I don't have the $400 or the $300, I'm going to sit in jail. I mean, these are the kinds of questions that we have to ask ourselves. And we have to have an office and a culture that allows us to ask those questions. And I'm sure there's going to be a few of those people who think, you know what, this is not my game. I've been here for 25 years, and this is not how I want to be a prosecutor. And, you know, I'll thank them for their service, and they can leave. But we need to do things better and smarter, and we're not going to do that until we have a new prosecutor.